So I'm in northwest Arkansas. I believe I'm on the right path now. I had kind of scouted for it earlier and wasn't quite sure I was in the right spot, but I believe I am now. And it's just a absolutely beautiful location. If I can get it in the background at all where you can see it, well, there's the path running along there, but all along here is a stream or creek, whichever you prefer. And when we, again, quote unquote, found this in 2019, we didn't know it was here. We had actually come for the main waterfall right off the road near the recreation area where I'm camping. And we stumbled upon finding this stream leading to the main creek, and with it, just some absolutely gorgeous cascades. And when we were here, it was the first week of April in 2019, and it was just the very, very early days of spring. So most of the trees were still bare. There was just a hint of ground cover starting to bud out. Still absolutely beautiful back then, but certainly knew there was going to be some pretty awesome potential with things greened out. Now, one could argue that maybe I'm here a little too late, as I doubt any of the dogwoods or redbuds are still going to be blooming, but that is fine. Not much I could do about that. So I'm just doing a scouting hike, as you might have noticed. I don't have my backpack with me or anything, so I just wanted to come in here and kind of check things out. It's almost 3 p.m., so the light is still pretty harsh coming through the canopy and creating some spotlights or hot spots on the ground. And just up here is the first cascade that I had in mind of coming back to revisit. I just need to figure out the best way to cross, and we'll get there. So let me concentrate on this, because now I need to get across this back here. If you can, there we go, got to cross that and get my way up there a little bit. So let me sign off for now and focus on that so I don't fall on my ass. Okay, well, that crossing was way easier than I thought. Hopefully you can hear me okay over the rushing water. It appears that the flow is quite a bit less than what it was when we were here in 2019. It also took me way less work to get here. I think I came in a little bit further upstream than where we found this stream, creek, whatever, back then. So I remembered having to do a lot more wading through water. I didn't have to do any of that today. But I do think the stream is a fair bit lower, which kind of surprises me, or the flow is a fair bit lower, which surprises me for the simple fact that we've had a ton of rain in Texas, and I thought a lot of it had also been moving through Arkansas recently. But yeah, it's not flowing nearly at the rate that I remember. I could be remembering incorrectly, but I'm pretty sure this is a fair bit lower than what I have in my mind's eye. I'll throw up one of my photos from 2019. It was kind of the tail end of my time when I was doing a whole lot of more extreme editing and kind of painting and light and things like that. So I've been meaning to go back and revisit those edits. But anyways, I'll throw that up. I believe when I shot this cascade, I was set up somewhere over in that general area to shoot up along this kind of S-curve that's here up to the main cascade. So as you can likely tell right now, there's quite a hot spot on a log that has fallen across. And in my best recollection, that tree was not there in 2019. I think that's new deadfall, new in terms of the last 5 years at least. But man, it's still absolutely gorgeous. And of course I can come further up here and continue my way on upstream. Now this was as far as we went in 2019. Further up along here, there should be a much taller actual waterfall instead of just these, albeit beautiful, but small cascades. So I want to go up there and check that out on this little scouting hike. And again, I'll come back here in the evening most likely when the sun is lower. I'm avoiding these hot spots. I'll bring the camera back up here and we'll set up for some compositions. You can also kind of tell in the water here the absolutely beautiful color of the water. It's not quite that vibrant to the naked eye, but you do have that wonderful, I guess mineral greenish tone, aqua tone to it. So definitely been looking forward to finding that. And of course, anything like this is just spectacular for me to find because in Texas, we ain't got nothing like this. And here in Arkansas, I'm surrounded by dozens of waterfalls within 30 to 45 minute drive from this campsite here. So let me once again stop yammering at the camera. I'm gonna make my way up just a little bit of a scramble there, right in that area. And then further up there, I need to figure out how to get past that. I know it's doable. Just looking at it right now, I'll probably cross back across the stream. It looks like it might be easier to get up there. And again, further up, it looks like there might be some new deadfall that wasn't here. Again, to the best of my memory, it's been 5 years, so I could be wrong. But anyways, just absolutely gorgeous location. It's nice and cool, which is definitely a nice reprieve from being back home in Texas. So yeah, absolutely thrilled to be here. Okay, so theoretically I should be right around the bigger, taller actual waterfall, if not a little bit past it. It was only supposed to be a quarter mile up, and I've gone 0.28 miles from my campsite. So my next challenge is figuring out how to get past all of this. There's really not a clear route. I think maybe, if I can point to it. Come on, nope, too far. I think I can maybe scramble up this little cascade here. It looks like there's enough stones to step through. The water down here at my feet would probably come up over my knees, which is fine, but I've got my knee-high neoprene, that's the word. I can't talk today. I've got my knee-high neoprene socks on. I'd prefer to stay dry, so I don't really want to go up to my thighs wading through. So I got to figure this out, and then I think if I get past this and I'm still not seeing the tall waterfall, I'm gonna have to backtrack perhaps and see if I can figure out if I'm even on the right path. I thought I was, but given the lay of the land here, I don't really see how there could be a much taller waterfall up there. So yeah, we'll have to see. There's a ton of deadfall. I don't know if you can see it in the camera, but there's a whole ton of deadfall back up there. Deadfall across the stream. So I don't know if some storms came through. I mean, some of this has obviously been here for a while, but there's some freshly broken limbs and stuff further back there a little bit. So anyways, I'm just gonna have to figure out, see if I can get past this little obstacle. I'm sure I can. The challenge will be if I do find something further up there, it'll be much harder to get back there with the loaded camera bag on my back. So again, we'll keep our fingers crossed. Hopefully I can get past this and see what lies around the bend, so to speak, and we'll go from there. Okay, I think I may be coming up on the waterfall I had in mind. It's much further up than what I was expecting. I just checked on my GPS tracker and I'm about 0.35 miles up. So I guess not a huge difference, but the guidebook I was looking at said 0.25. But as you can see behind me, I might have to get closer. There's trees in the way, but there is a pretty good size waterfall right through there. It looks like there's a little bit of a what is my problem? I cannot talk today. A little bit of a worn trail up here, which is not surprising. I don't think a lot of people come up here, but it is a known waterfall. So let me wind my way through, and there we go. This, I'm guessing, is it. There we are. Beautiful little waterfall. Again, the flow isn't quite what I was expecting, but regardless, still absolutely beautiful. So I think whether I come back up here this evening, or maybe what I'll do to come all the way up here to this waterfall is do this in the morning. That way I'm dealing with gaining light instead of losing light. So I did have to do a little bit of scrambling to get back here. So better to do that when I've got more light coming in than rapidly fading light and potentially having to rely on my headlamp in slippery conditions. So, but the original composition I shot back in 2019, that I could definitely shoot this evening if the light cooperates, which it should. We've got clear blue skies, and that's pretty much what I'm going to have for most of this long weekend trip. So I can aim to get that out of the way this evening, and then tomorrow morning get an early start and come up here for this larger water. Again, I can't say the word, waterfall. And this isn't some massive thing. It's probably 20-ish feet. But regardless, still really beautiful. And I can get up closer still. So I should be able to get up here and get up to get a view of the pool if I want to. Maybe I can climb up here. Got to watch my step because a lot of these rocks are very slick. Yeah, maybe I can get up somewhere around here to actually shoot the composition. Use a wider angle lens to get the full height of the falls plus the basin. But again, I'd have to be up here in early enough light that I'm not getting the really harsh highlights up in the canopy above. Or I could do something like this and avoid the canopy completely, but it'd probably be a pretty nice shot if I can include at least some of it with a wide angle. So there we go, I found it. And the fact that the flow is not quite as strong as I expected it to be is fine, because again, with a slightly longer exposure, there's a lot of thinner tendrils coming down that should show up nicely with that longer exposure. So I'm not too worried about that. And again, I think you can just pick it up, the nice color that's coming into the water with all of the minerals and deposits that flow through this region. So there we go. Most likely I will be signing off for now until the evening, and I'll check back in hopefully when I'm shooting that composition further back down the stream that I shot in 2019, but this time with lots of lush, beautiful green foliage around. So, well worth the scout. Okay, so I'm back at the little cascades that I pointed out earlier. Literally not even a 5-minute hike from the campsite I'm at. So, as you can see, most likely it is quite a bit darker back here. The sunlight is still on the very upper reaches of the canopy up above, but not on the water at all. So we're going to get set up here and see what composition works best. With the water flow being lower than at least what I remember it being last time when I was here in 2019, I think I might have to work on the composition a little bit more, because where I was set up before, which is right here, if memory serves me correctly, I don't know that I'm getting quite enough of the cascade that I want to include in the frame. I might even move downstream a little bit. It's right behind me. If we can get it in, you can see there's a little bit of a curving cascade there as well. So I'm just gonna have to kind of play around. I might just do some test compositions on the phone first, just for the sake of ease, and then get the tripod and big boy camera out and get set up. But even though the light's pretty dim in here, I do really like the way it's still catching on some of the foliage and greenery. You can see hopefully behind me. I am far from a botanist, so I don't know what tree that is, but there's a ton of them with these giant leaves that are still glowing with the faint sunlight. So I'd like to include some of those if possible. So we'll see. Before if it gets any darker in here, I'm gonna shut up and start working on my composition. All right, so with me out of the way, you probably have a little better idea of what I'm working with here. I'm just using my iPhone camera, like I said, to try to work up some different compositions. You can see there's some foliage growing along the sides of the rocks in that I might be able to incorporate in some way as kind of a foreground element, but I think there's already so much going on in the scene. I don't necessarily want to put something really big in the foreground like that and draw the eye away from the main star of the show, so to speak, which is this cascades coming down. I am trying to figure out how to get a composition set up so I can see the cascades coming around kind of the backside of this large boulder with the white lichen on it, which I hate that white lichen. It was here in 2019 and it's still here in 2024. But that is a nice little S-curve working into the scene there if I can get my main camera high enough and oriented in such a manner that I can include it. So I'm gonna have to play around with that. So again, I'm gonna use my phone camera first and see what I can work out here. So if I just work with the default lens, which is about 24mm on the iPhone, if I get up to about this point, I am mostly getting that back little cascade coming in as well as the small one down here. And I have no idea if I'm pointing in the proper locations, but there's a really small cascade on the little left, and then the bigger one coming around that big boulder with the white lichen on the right, and then the main cascade further back there with the broken tree or broken log. So I'm probably going to work to try to get up on top of this boulder here. I just have to be careful because it is really slick, and my boots are, or my sandals are covered with water and a little bit of mud from walking along the bank of the stream here. And as soon as I hit any moss or lichen, I tend to slide out. Actually, that boulder right there, I fell on my butt back in 2019 to the great amusement of everybody that was with me at the time. So anyways, I do want to try to get up higher though, because if I get up higher, then I've got more potential to get the connection of that back cascade up to the little pool at the bottom of the main cascade in the background there. But again, I'd love to have some of this foliage in as well. So I'm just gonna have to really play around here and see what I can come up with. And I don't know that I can even get up on this thing without potentially killing myself. And there's a nice gap there I don't want my foot to slip into. We're just gonna old man this. So from about here, I've got a pretty nice shot. Let me take my test phone shot and I can throw it onto the video so you can kind of see what I'm working with. So that's a 24mm. Zoom out a little bit at roughly 15mm. And then I can pull that up and obviously see what I might be working with. And I'm using live exposures on my iPhone so I can switch those into a long exposure view. It frames in or crops in a little bit, but it gives me a better idea of what the composition will look like with the smoothed out water and the white rapids coming through. So if I can get myself situated up here, I think this is a pretty good spot for my composition. I could potentially come down here and get more of the connecting cascade. Now I totally lose the left one here unless I back up some. So let me take this test shot. I'm not being super careful with my composition, just eyeballing it. I want a rough estimation of what I'd be able to work with the main camera. But by coming over here, I'm getting more of that connecting S-curve to the back cascade to the pool that's up there with some nice color in the water. So again, I think what it's going to come down to, I'm just going to have to play around and see what I can work out. I want to work somewhat quickly because it is getting very dim in here, and I don't want to have too long of an exposure on the water to where everything just totally gets ghosted out and smoothed out. I do like having a little bit of texture in the water. So push come to shove, I may end up doing multiple exposures, kind of one for the surroundings and then one for the water itself if I find myself having to get into too long of exposures. And of course I can always raise the ISO as well to shorten the shutter speed and avoid things from getting too smoothed out. Of course there it's a balance of noise versus shutter speed. And yes, I've got tools in Adobe Lightroom with their new or newish noise reduction AI tool, but obviously the better you can do, or the better you're off you're going to be no matter what if you're shooting at a lower ISO to begin with. So enough yammering, I'm going to make my way back to my bag, scramble over this little somewhat slippery rock, and we'll get set up with the real camera and see what we can come away with. Okay, so I've got the R5 out now. Just a quick note, I've got my 14 to 35 f4 on the body with my case circular polarizer. Even though it's so dark and I don't necessarily want to cut any light, the polarizer is still going to come in handy most likely with cutting off some of the reflection of the light. I'm actually going to work on playing with some compositions kind of squatted down in the middle of the stream right here before I make my way back up towards that spot I was at before where I was doing the test iPhone shots. But I want to see what I can do with the water kind of rushing right towards me, and I might move back behind the video camera here. Again, I've got an S-curve coming just out of frame down here in the lower corner of an S-curve cascade kind of winding its way through. If I'm down there, I won't have any of that upper pool that's at the base of the far back main cascade, but it may work with some additional interest with this S-curve right here and then kind of the S-curve back there. So again, with this kind of stuff, it's all going to be a matter of playing around and seeing what works on the big boy. All right, so again, I'm playing around here using my handy dandy flippy screen to get down low and just doing handheld compositions. I'm at, what am I at? Half a second, f16, ISO 1600. And again, I'm probably going to have to use that higher ISO so I don't get too long of a shutter speed dragged out. Have to play with it and see. It's pretty clear right here at least. I'm trying to get down low and get a nice composition. I'll throw one of the test frames up, but there's just too much kind of uninteresting flowing water in the foreground. So I'm going to have to move up there. Now I got to get out of this spot without slipping. There's also a ton of mud along the shore that keeps giving away. So if I come up here now, more to where I was originally, again, if you can see it, I've got a little bit of foliage coming out of the rock here. So maybe I can kind of play with that as a subtle foreground that's not too in your face. So I'll eventually, of course, get out the tripod and set up for the compositions. But again, right now, I'm just working on my compositions from a test standpoint to see what really works. So I'm just shooting a handheld. Even with half a second, I'm getting sharp enough photos that I can gauge what the composition is going to look like and whether it's going to work or not. So that's where I'm at right now. Just going to keep working the scene and see what works best. All right, so perhaps ironically, I ended up liking the framing of the composition of the video from that last segment I recorded. So I've set my camera basically where the tripod had been for the video, and you probably can't see for the sake of the camera, but hopefully the back screen of the camera is still on. Let's get way too close here and check. Yeah, so you can see the framing I've got here. It's coming down the main stream. I've got a little bit of polarization on the water, but not too much because I'm using a little bit of the brightness in this main cascade here, or not main cascade, but this wider section coming shallowly over the rocks. I'm using a little bit of brightness in there to balance or counterbalance the brightness up in the canopy of the trees further up. And I've got these nice big leaves here as well. Now the challenge is I'm shooting at 0.3 of a second, so I've got to be careful with movement, and there's a little bit of wind, like these big leaves are kind of bouncing a little bit, so I've got to wait as best as I can for the breeze to die, try to grab the shot real quickly and go from there. So that's the current composition I'm working at. I'm still gonna play around with trying to get up higher and incorporate that S-curve a little bit more. And then again, go further downstream and play with the S-curve that's out of frame at the bottom here. But that's the current plan. Looks like the wind is a little calm, so I'm gonna try to get out of frame without falling. Grab the shot. And I'll stop recording here, check the back of the camera, check for sharpness, movement in the leaves and everything, and we will go from there. So I'm just going to check for sharpness. I think there was a little bit of movement in the foliage, although now that I'm looking at it, nothing looks too obvious, at least in those largest leaves that are over there. So looks like I'm sharp from front to back, which makes sense because the focal point I chose was at infinity, relatively close to the camera. I don't have any weird intersections of the trees in the background I don't like. Maybe, now that I say that, maybe one right in the middle. But there's not much I can do about that, I think, without kind of throwing off the frame in general. So let's go back to live, grab my remote. Again, I have just a little bit of polarization enabled. If I rotate my CPL, I can actually bring in a little bit more brightness. And we're just going to give a moment here, see if we can get the wind to calm down, and get a couple more frames fired off here, just kind of as safety frames. I am at ISO 800, which is workable, especially with AI noise reduction. I dropped down to F9, given the distance from the lens that my foreground elements are. Speaking of which, let me check one thing in the foreground, make sure we're sharp there. And we are, so we're good there. So yeah, I've got front to back focus at F9, so that's always nice. And then as far as focal length goes, I'm currently at 25 millimeters. So again, we're just waiting on a little bit of a brief pause in the wind to get those big leaves to stop bouncing up and down a little bit. And we'll get a couple more shots in here and then I'll recompose. All right, bear with me. I know I'm completely out of focus, but you've got the back of the camera to take a look at. Where I'm standing right now is about where my tripod was set up for the previous composition. I've moved back to get more of this S-curve down here, if I can kind of step and point without slipping on the moss here, but this curving cascade through here. Now, whoa, speaking of slipping, I like the look of the composition. However, I've basically totally eliminated the larger cascade at the top of this kind of series of smaller cascades. So I'm not sure from a composition standpoint how I'm really feeling about it. I think it's fairly well balanced, but most of the interest is now kind of in that foreground S-curve, and everything in the background is kind of lost. And again, especially that main cascade up above, if I remember correctly, it's behind these trees, kind of between it and the cascade. So I don't know that that's going to work. I can move the camera over towards where I'm at, keeping further back still. Right now it's actually straddling a little cascade in the stream, so I'm basically in the middle of the stream. But if I shift it over, maybe I can get that background cascade in frame again and work with that. Actually, let me just do that while it's recording. See if I can get down here without falling. And bear with me. So if I come over hereabouts, now we've got that bigger cascade in the background. Way out of kilter here. So let me work on this framing. I think if I pan towards the left a little bit, I'm getting that S-curve, getting that S-curve coming through here. I've got a little bit of interest in the little foliage clinging to the rock there. If I zoom, I'm going to stick my head in the frame here. Bear with me for a second. I'm checking. So with my focal point right in that general area there, I'm on infinity. So I should have good depth of field front to back. You can see I'm at ISO 640, still at aperture of f9 and half a second shutter speed, which I found is working pretty well with this cascade. So I'm going to grab the frame. It looks like we're pretty still right now. And somehow I moved my focal point up there. That's not good. So let's refocus. Stick my head in again. We're close to infinity, but not quite there. So let's pick a little bit further. That'll work. Come on. Come on. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so I got my focal point in the right spot now, so let me grab the shot. So I think this is working better. I'm still getting that curve through here, but I'm getting a little bit of white water up here. Unfortunately, again, I've got that white lichen on the rock. I don't know how much that's showing up on the video. And then way in the background right there is that main cascade just peeking in. Whereas on the previous composition, you weren't seeing that main cascade up there. I'm not sure I like all of this on the right side. So I could look at panning this to the left more, but then of course I've got the risk of bringing in some stuff I don't necessarily want on the left. Let me play with my polarization so I can pull out a lot of the glare out of the water, but I think then we're going to lose too much of it in the surroundings, especially with that brighter patch of sunlight or sunlit foliage or canopy in the background. So I want to keep some glare in the water, not too much, maybe right about there. So let's take a quick composition or a quick frame here and see how that water is looking. So again, I've got still some good lightness in the water, pretty similar to where I had it before. I might actually bring a little bit back. You can see I'm also cutting glare out on the rock, so it's kind of a balancing game. I could do more blending, but again, I don't like to do more in Photoshop than I absolutely need to, because I just, whatever, you know me, I'm a Lightroom guy. So let's take that frame. Water looks good. We're not blowing the highlights in the water at all. So you can see here I'm getting a little bit more brighter tones in the water. Whoops. That was the previous polarization I was working with, and then the last one. So that's standing out a little bit more from the surroundings. You can see if you watch the rocks right in here, you're getting a little bit more, a little bit brighter on there as well. And again, I hope this is showing up on the back of the camera screen for you in the recording, but I think I'm happy with the composition. And actually I'm going to take a quick frame because the foliage is looking pretty still. Let's see how we're looking. That looks pretty good. Probably still take a safety frame at a higher shutter speed for the foliage just in case. The other thing I have to consider is my histogram is really up against the left of the histogram frame. I think I've got enough there to pull detail into the shadows a little bit in these darkest shadows, but I may take a safety frame there as well. Again, get a longer shutter speed to pull some detail into shadows, and again, I can do blending in Photoshop after the fact. So let me work on that stuff, and if I do another composition, I'll check in. All right, so you can see on the back of the camera here that I've moved back upstream, and I'm getting more of that elevated shot I talked about earlier, trying to get more of the pool at the base of the falls here, and then getting this nice cascade kind of curling through the bottom part of the frame. I think it works okay. I mean, with all of this stuff, I think really it's going to be a matter of getting back home and taking a look at the shots on the bigger monitor to really gauge how things have worked out. I don't know, I'm feeling kind of blasé about this evening's shoot here in this little section. Don't really know why. Maybe it's just because it's been a long time since I've really done any kind of longer exposure waterfall / cascades photography like this. It could quite frankly be the fact that this is my first photography trip since my mom passed away, and you know, that's obviously on my mind, so maybe that's just making me a little bit of a pessimist. I mean, it's beautiful, don't get me wrong. I'm thrilled to be here. just not too sure about how the photography is actually coming out. So I do think I made the right call in terms of coming back here in the evening, so I didn't have hot spots of sunlight that was coming through the tree canopy. Speaking of which, I worked on framing the composition. I wanted to make sure I had the nice cascades down in the bottom here in the bottom part of the frame, but also worked to not get too much of the canopy included, because this canyon area is in shadow enough now at this point. Any of the foliage that's picking up any bit of the last sunlight is just way too bright compared to the rest of the scene. I could multiple exposure stack it or whatever, but I think where I've got the composition framed up on this one is a pretty good compromise, with just getting enough of the foliage to kind of give a sense of the place without getting into the super bright areas and pulling away the eye from the main focus of the scene, which is obviously these cascades and the main cascade back there. So I'm happy I came back out here this evening. Again, tomorrow morning the plan is I'll get up early enough that this canyon is still in shade, and hopefully make my way up to that larger waterfall at the end of the canyon in terms of as far as I can go, or reasonably can go. A little bit concerned about making it through some of the scrambles that I've got to get through with the backpack on. Debating whether I bring my hiking poles or not. I don't really think that'll help, because it's really, I need my hands more than anything, but I don't want a ton of weight on my back throwing me off balance. So I'll probably leave the 100 to 400 back at camp, probably leave the second camera body back at camp, and just lighten the load as much as I can so I'm not too off balance while I'm having to scramble. And as you saw earlier, some of these spots are really slick, so I've got to be very cautious about foot placement and everything. I'm here on this trip by myself, so I certainly don't want to put myself in a bad position in terms of making a too risky decision. I've got my GPS tracker, my satellite tracker, but that's not going to do me much good, even though I'm very close to campsite here. Going further up, even right here, but further up especially, if I was having to yell or anything, nobody's going to hear me. So I've got to figure that out. I think I'll be okay. There's just one spot in particular that's a little bit of a off-balance scramble as it is, even without the backpack on. So we'll see how that goes. But otherwise, I think I'm done for the day, so I'm going to head on back to camp, make some dinner, and then get ready to settle down. So with all that said, hope you've enjoyed this beautiful outing along this stream, and we'll check in tomorrow. So until then, take care. Thank you, as always, to my Patreon members for the ongoing contributions as I pursue my passion to bring the beauty of the world into your homes through videos like this and more. If you'd like to help support my work, you can do so by becoming a member of my Patreon, purchasing fine art prints via my website, or by making a one-time donation through PayPal. Your support is always greatly appreciated.